All right, how's everybody? This in this lecture series, what we will do is that we will look at a very important concept in all programming languages, and that is known as conditional statements. Right? Conditional statement basically means what kind of methodology do we use to make decisions in programming, right? Let me give you a quick example. Let's just say, and I know we know variables from previous class. So let's say today is equals to Friday, all right? And then I can. So now that I got that, and also I want to say is payday, right? That's another variable. Now the top variable, that is a string, and when I say string, that means it's got a whole bunch of characters in single quote. That is a string, right? Is payday. That is not a string variable. That's a boolean. Boolean is normally a true or a false. It has only two values, a true or a false. So I have two variables, right? So what I want to do now, how do I go about checking or writing code to check if today is Friday and if it's a payday? If both are true, then I can say, hey, let's go shopping. So in a very simple term, I can say if today double equals, right? Remember, the Python is a double equal, not one equal, but double equal. And that is how I check for equality, right? I'm checking for equality in Python. All right, so I can say something like that, and then I can say is equal to today is equal to Friday, right? And if it is, then you need to put a colon, right? You see the symbol? That is very important, right? That tells Python where the block starts. So after that colon, and then you simply say whatever you need to say. I'm going to say print, right? Today is Friday, right? So you see now this is a very basic structure of writing a conditional statement. Normally when you talk to somebody, you don't say conditional statement. It's always if and else, right? If and else is what everybody, in programmers normally say, right? If and else. Okay, so you watch what happens, and then when you write this if conditional statements, right? You need to say if, which is a keyword, and then here you will put the condition, and then you'll have a colon, which is required, and then you need to put a tab. The tab here, right? Tab, and then not two spaces. Even that's wrong. It needs to be a tab. That tab tells which code to execute that belongs to this conditional. So that's going to be executed, right? I can also say print, let's not go shopping yet, right? So these two lines belong to that statement. I can also put here, do I have any money, right? Single quote like that. Now, how about if I take the tab out in this case? You see the layout of my code has changed a little bit. So does this line belong to this to this condition? It does not. And the reason it does not belong is because there is not a tab here, right? Now it belongs. So instead of Friday, let me just put Monday, all right? Monday. So I have a variable called today, and I've set it to Monday, right? And I'm checking if today is equal to Friday, then print this out, right? So if I run this, what should print on the screen? Nothing, right? Nothing should print because this is not true. However, if I go ahead and change this to Friday, now this is true, all right? This is true. So all of these should print. You can run the module right here, and you see it prints these 3 lines of code. 3 lines of output. Okay, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to change it to Monday, right? So now today is Monday. When I run, nothing's going to print, but I'm going to take this out, take it out of the scope, right? So according to what we have discussed, when I execute that line of code, these should not print because this condition is not true, right? However, that line should print because that line does not belong to this condition. And how do we know it doesn't belong to this condition? Because the tab is not there, right? That piece is not there. So let's test it out. Let's test out our things. All right, there you go. It prints it out. All right, prints it out. So even you see I mean, I can put a space here. I mean, I can put an enter here, right? It doesn't really matter. Even though if I take those out, you see line number 7 is very close to line number 6. I can put an enter here. It's still the same concept and same output. You will see the same output, just like what we have seen. Okay, now this is simple string comparison, right? I can also say, right, if today is Friday. Now, sometimes, you check for one condition, right? You check for one condition, but other time you check for many conditions. What I'm saying here is that, like I'm saying, if today's Friday, and then I want to say if today is Friday and if today is a payday, right? So I can put here, if today, Friday, and is payday equals to true, right? Normally, when you use a Boolean value, like a Boolean variable, then this does not need to be there, right? Because I'm checking if it's, I'm saying if today is equal to Friday and is payday, right? And is payday already has a true. Only when you're checking for false, then you can. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this in the long format, just so you all following what I'm trying to do, right? And then I can say print, hey, it's Friday, and it's payday, right? When I run this, what should be the output to the screen? Is today Friday? It is not, because today is set to Monday, right? And is today Friday and is payday true? No, today is not Friday. Regardless of if payday is true, today is not Friday, right? And when you have an and variable, I mean and operator in the middle, both of these need to be true in order for that sentence to be true, all right? So now if I run this piece, you see, it's going to give me nothing, right? However, there is another operator that comes outside of and, all right? So I'm going to say, I'm just putting a variation here, right? I'm going to put and here, just like a variation, so you can see what's going on. And then I'm going to change it. I'm going to say if today double equals, use double equal when you're comparison for equality, right? That one equal, I don't think that's going to work. Double equal, if today is Friday, or is payday, equals true. Now you see, print, I'm going to put or here because I'm testing or, right? It's Friday and Friday, or maybe it's payday, right? One of those is true. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. All right, so out of everything that we have here, this line at the end, the statements, the conditional statement on line 11, it produced a true result, right? And that's the reason we went ahead and printed this out. Let's follow this, right? Is today Friday? It is not, because today is Monday right there on top, right? Or is payday is true. So when you're using an or operator, one of these expression needs to be true, all right, in order for that to execute. Whereas if you use an and operator, that means both needs to be true, right? Both needs to be true in order for that to happen. So that's the difference between and an or. All right, that's the difference between and an or. Yeah, in very common concept in programming, you'll be using that many times. So I'm going to take this out and let's just use some numbers. Sometimes it's easy to use numbers. So I'm going to say number, integer. Normally don't put a space here. Input. That means new line. All right, so that will give me a number. And here I want to do a print. You entered right? So whatever I enter is going to print it out, right? And then I want to have a whole bunch of, please enter your total percent, right? No, let's just put please enter your score, right? Out of 100. So the number comes in, and what I want to do here is that I basically want to give some look at the I want to look at what score, what was the score, and based on what the user entered, I want to print out some good things about it, right? So let's watch. If number is greater than equal to 90, all right, greater than equal to 90, and number is less than equals to 100, right? We want to say something good. I'm going to say print great work. All right. Now, that is, I'm not going to stop there. I want to have some other options too, right? Some other comparison too. So I can do it in a couple of ways. I can do that, and I can do the same thing. Say if number, right, is greater than equal to 80, and number less than equals to 89, right? We'll print good job, right? And then I want to say if number, so you see, basically I'm allowing several different options, right? Several, not options, several different conditions based on what the user will enter as the number. Number is less than equal to 79, and here I'm going to say need to try harder, right? And then other option I want to put here, if number is less than equal to 60, let's put 69. Then I'm going to say print you failed. All right, so running this, let's give a try and see if it works properly for us. Okay, enter number, I'm going to put 87, right? It prints you entered 87, and good job, right? So if you follow the code, if you just read the code, line number 1 gets the input from the user, puts it into a variable called num. Line number 2 basically prints it out, right? That num, the variable, whatever number is sitting in it, it prints it out. And then line number 4, it checks if the number you entered, which is sitting in the variable called num, is greater than 90 and less than 100. So between 90 and 100, if it is, it's going to print great job, great work, and also is going to check after that right? Regardless of whether that is true or false, it's going to check that line as well, and then check this line, and also check this line. So how many evaluations, how many expression is it evaluating in total? 4, right? I mean, actually not more, actually more than 4, because it's evaluating that piece and then that piece also. But looking at code, you have that if statement, you have that another comparison, another one. Right. However, we know that only one of this can be true. I mean, if the person got a 95, then I need to print that out, and I do not need to evaluate this anymore, right? And that makes sense because once I got one of these to be true, I don't need to print this anymore. So Python provides this mechanism instead of just imagine if you had 100 or thousands of those, right? In some games you possibly can, right? You have a huge amount of if and else statements, right? You don't want, if not needed, you don't want it to be each one to be evaluated each time, right? I mean, if there's no, so in this case, it is not. So what I'm going to do, right? You can rewrite this whole thing in this manner. There's a code called elif, right? You see how I'm changing this? Elif, and else. Right? And it'd be good to kind of put them together. So it looks like everything is like one code. Right? So now what will happen, right? If that line is true, okay, line number 5 would get printed, and all of these would not be evaluated at all, right? All of these would not be evaluated at all. However, if this is false, this next line would be evaluated, and if that is true, then you will print good job, and none of these would be evaluated, looked upon anymore. It will not be evaluated anymore, right? So that is how if and elif works. This if and elif, the only time, or rather if and else, the only time you do it this way is when you know that only one condition can be true out of all the checks that you got. Right? Only one condition can be true. In this case, can be, because if I put a number such as all right, hoping that makes sense. And then all right, so that is fairly all right. We'll look at some conditions. Now, also, I'm not showing you how. Okay, I'm going to take this out. I'm going to take this out, and then I'm going to walk you through. Let's just use some variables. So number, and I'm going to set it to maybe 78, right? 78, and then I can simply say if number is greater than 0, all right, then I'm going to print number greater than 0. Okay, and then I can say if number, let me put a space here, right? If number is greater than 10, print wide open. Number is greater than 10. Right? Let me just put one more, just to show you the, what the difference is between, like I said, between having it if in each conditional statement on its own, using a if, or using an if and else. So here, let's just put number 78, right? When I run this, okay, this line will be evaluated, and 78 is greater than 0, it will print this line, and then 78 is greater than 10, it will print this line as well, and 78 is greater than 20. So it will print all of those lines. And if your code is requiring you to do something like that, then you go ahead and do it, right? Then it's okay to do it. However, I can also do here, I can say if number is greater than 20, greater than 20, all right? And I'm going to print the same thing, print right? And elif basically, other languages that you have done, you will see if, else if, right? It will be like else if. That is how it's said, but in Python it's elif, so it's equivalent, right? So a number is greater than 10, all right? I'm going to print else number is greater than, I'm sorry, this should be 10. Else number, no. So in a else, actually, I need to put a couple more just to number is greater than 5. All right, I'm going to print here number. Now, a spelling mistake, don't worry about it. Then 5. Right. And then I'm going to have else. So you see, all of these, right? All of these, there's a comparison, right? There's a condition. I'm saying if number is greater than 20, if not, check that out. If not, go this as the default. So whenever you see an else by itself and you don't see some comparison right here, that means this is the default. This is the default. What that means is that if none of these is true, then automatically it's going to print this line. All right, let's run this one. Here I should get like a 20, right? I should get a 20, I think. Yeah, 20, 78 is greater than 20. What if I change this to number 2, right? Now you see, I don't have any of these condition that will be true, right? Because number 2 is not greater than 20, number 2 is not greater than 10, and number 2 is not greater than 5, right? So when I run this line, right, it gives me 2 is greater than 0. It prints this part, right? And that is the default. So what I'm saying is that keep testing all of these, and if none of these are true, then execute that line of code, right? It's the else part. All right, so that is it. Also, I can do something. Okay, let me. When you're doing if and else, it just doesn't mean that you can. Everything needs to be this way, right? There is this other concept where we can nest them, right? We can build a nested loop. That means not loop, nested if statements inside of each other. So I can say, let's just change this to, I don't know, maybe 78 or something like that, 88, right? So here I can say if number is greater than 88 and number is less than equal to 100, not 88, 50. All right? And this bad cough for like lingering for like 2 or 3 weeks, not even leaving me. Okay, so I'm checking if the number is between, make it equal to, right? Make it, number is greater than equal to 50, or number is less than equal to 100. That means number is between 50 and 100. If that's the case, I'm going to check again. If number, right, number here is greater than equal to 50 and all right, and I can also say if number equals 55, then you print 55, right? You see my point? And then here I can put elif. No, this is just a silly example. I don't think you'll ever need to code, comparing, checking if number is 55, right? You will, but the concept is here. The concept of nested conditional statements, right? You have one conditional statement, and inside that you have another one. Inside that you have another one. So regardless of how this is written, right? As long as this is true, your code will go right here. It will check for that. If that is true, it's going to go here. It will check for that. If that is true, if that is not true, it's going to come down here and check if it is 58. All right, kind of silly. And then if that's not case, it's going to say else. Okay. Now, also, you watch how the tabbing is, right? Else. And I'm just making stuff up here, so I'm going to stop right here, right? And I can put print, hi there, all right? And then I can also put down here, say else. less than. Right. So this is an example. Basically, this is a nested conditional statement, right? Nested conditional statement, because you see in this expression, that line is evaluated. If that is not true, it's going to come down right here and print this one out. However, if this is true, in this case, it's going to be, then that line will be evaluated, right? And if it's evaluated, if it's true, then it's going to test all of these out. But if it is not, it's going to come down here, right? So in some cases, I've done this many times. If you need to do a nested conditional statement, that is how it's done, right? And run this code, you see. So it did not print anything, right? And the reason it did not print anything is because that is true, right? That is true. 88 goes here, but none of these is true. Actually, if I put an else here, right, then it would be true. So I'm going to say number is greater than spelling mistake, right? You can fix it. So now, right, you see it prints this line of code, because basically 88 it's true for this, but 88 does not fall here. So none of these gets execute, and then 88 does not fall into here as well. So that doesn't execute, and then by default it will execute the else part of it, right? So that's how it gets, the else gets executed. Okay, so that is that. Let me see what else is important, at least for this lecture, right? Okay, we saw that. All right, I think that's good. Yeah, if and else is fairly, straightforward, common, straightforward concept, but very important concept though. All right, hopefully this helps. And just like I said, go over it again, try different things, and see the nested, how the nested conditional statement works. The other thing to remember is that, let me show you that, right? Let me show you that. I can put number 80. Let's just say I have an income. Income is, let's just put pay. For some reason, I like the pay in 5,023 point. Okay, that's our pay. And I'm going to put here is Friday is equals to true. All right, and then I'm going to put here expenses, right? Expenses is equal to I don't know, 4500. Okay, so now you see I have three variables, right? Three variables. What I'm going to do, I'm going to basically come up with some kind of code that tells me if I can go shopping, right? And the concept is, if my surplus, if my savings is greater than 1,000, right, then go shopping. All right. So let's put this up. So I'm going to say if pay, right, minus, well, maybe it's better for me to put it right here, right? That means I'm going to say savings is equals to pay minus expenses. All right, so that is that, and then basically check if savings is greater than 1,000, all right, and is Friday, and like I said, if I'm checking for a boolean to be true, right, I can do it that way, or I can just take that out and leave it that way, right? I can do it that way, and that'd be okay too. If savings is greater than Friday and it's Friday, and then we put here, or right, or I need to have another variable here, right? can shop is equals to false, right? And then, so I'm going to say if savings is greater than 1,000, and if it is Friday, or can shop equals true, right? You must be saying, hey, professor, you just told me a Boolean about, about true or false. So here, can shop is a variable, and I want to see if it's true. I can just take it out, right? I can take it out, and that'll be okay. Now, so I have a mixture of and or, right? I have a mixture of. You must be wondering, how do I decide which one gets executed first, right? So in here, the best way to do it, to group them together, right? Because I want this piece to, I want this piece to get executed first, right? Instead of that piece, right? I want these two to evaluate first, right? So I can basically put a parenthesis around it in that manner, right? So when my code runs, it will check, is it Friday or can shop? If one of them is true, then the whole thing is replaced by true, and then that is matched with this answer. Let's go shopping. All right. Else can shop. All right. So run this. Here you have why I had a dot, a period there for some reason that didn't make any sense, but I had it there. Right? It says can shop. That means cannot shop. Right? Let's follow it. Okay. Let's follow it. So here I have you see this if statement. Which piece of this gets evaluated first? Because I have three comparison here. That's one, and then I have another one right here, and another one right here. So anything in parentheses gets evaluated first, right? Is it Friday or can shop? So Friday is true, right? Friday is true. Can shop is false. So it's true or false. True or false. What's the outcome of the whole thing? It's true, right? Remember, when you have an or, if one of them is true, then the whole thing is true. So what happens is that this whole piece, right, is replaced by a true, right? The outcome is true. So is my savings greater than 1,000? Which it is not, because I think it's about 500, right? So there is a false, and a true gives me a false, because there's an and. In order for the whole expression to be true, when using an and, right, everything needs to be true, right? Each and expression needs to be true. And when I say expression, I'm talking about that's an expression, right? That itself is an expression. That itself is an expression. So that is how you combine and or together, right? You always, if need be, right, you use parentheses, and if parentheses is not there, all right, then the end gets evaluated first. These would get evaluated first, right? So I'm going to run this, and you see the answer will change, right? Okay, can shop, and the reason is because that is false. So these two, right, a false, and a true gives you a false, and false or a false gives you a false. So if I change this to true, you'll see it here. Right? Now, I'm going to leave everything the way it is, and I'm going to run this. And, right, so the whole thing is, this evaluated to be true, right? Savings is greater than 1,000 is false. False, and is Friday's false. So what does a false and a false give you? It's still a false, right? It's still a false. So false or a true gives you a true, right? So it gives you a true. That's why this is true. However, if I go ahead and put a parenthesis around these two, because I want that to be evaluated first, you see my answer would change. My answer would no longer be true. It will be cannot shop, right? Can shop. And the reason that's happening is because that expression will give me a true, a false, and that will give me a true. So together, a true or a false gives me a true, right? However, a false and a true is always a false, right? So that's, you have to remember when you're using and or, you have to kind of understand how they work together. All right, hopefully that helps. I'm going to stop this lecture here, and good luck.